The following is a DW Ancient Egypt production. Initially, Amenhotep IV lived with Nefertiti and his 6 daughters at Thebes. He built several massive buildings at Karnak, including temples to the god Aten. The god was usually depicted as a sun disk with rays extending with long arms and tiny human hands at each end. The Aten was not a new deity, but had been venerated since the Old Kingdom as a relatively minor aspect of the sun god Ra. Year 5 of Amenhotep IV's reign changed everything. He disbanded the priesthoods of all other gods and diverted the income of these cults to support the Aten, which he was establishing as the sole god of Egypt. To emphasize his complete allegiance to the Aten, he officially changed his name from Amenhotep IV to Akhetaten, the living spirit of Aten. He also began construction of a new capital called Akhetaten, the horizon of the Aten. Known as el-Amarna, it was a virgin site not previously dedicated to any gods or goddesses. To speed up construction of the city, which was located halfway between Memphis and Thebes, most of the buildings were erected with mud brick and whitewashed. The most important buildings were faced with local stone. Amarna is the only ancient city which preserved great details of its internal plan, in large part because the city was abandoned after the death of Akhetaten. Bob Breyer notes, Akhetaten was an entire city built at one time to the glory of one god. This was a first for the history books. Akhenaten centralized Egyptian religious practices in Akhetaten, though construction of the city remains to have continued for several more years. His temples to Aten were constructed on a massive scale and were open to the sunlight, unlike the dark temple enclosures as before. In year 9, Akhenaten banned all images except the solar disk and declared that the Aten was not merely supreme god, but the only god to worship. In doing this, he created the world's first monotheistic religion, noting, "There is no god but the Aten." This was an incredible declaration in a world of polytheistic religions, an abstract god with no image. This must have been a very confusing time for the Egyptians. They never had an abstract god before. They were used to gods you could create in statues, something physical. With Akhenaten, now you had the rays of the sun, only one god, something way ahead of its time, something truly amazing. An interesting message, and one to consider, Akhenaten wrote that the Aten was the god of everyone. The Syrians, Palestinians, and Nubians. This belief changed the divine order. With this concept, Egypt was no longer special in a sense. The Aten shines on everyone. Akhenaten presented himself as the only intermediary between Aten and his people. He ordered the defacing of Amun's temples throughout Egypt and made a complete break from the priests of Amun. In a tomb of Ai occurs the longest and best rendition of a composition known as the Hymn to the Aten, said to have been written by Akhenaten himself. Quite moving in itself as a piece of poetry, its similarity to Psalm 104 has long been noted. It sums up the whole ethos of the Aten cult, and especially the concept that only Akhenaten had access to the god. Thou arisest fair in the horizon of heaven, O living Aten, beginner of life. There is none who knows thee save thy son Akhenaten. Thou hast made him wise in thy plans and thy power. No longer did the dead call upon Osiris to guide them through the afterworld, for only through the intercession of Akhenaten could they hope to live beyond the grave. On a wider scale, throughout Egypt, this new cult does not seem to have had much effect at a common level. Ordinary people had little to do with the religious establishment anyway, and these changes only affected the high days and holidays. The standard bureaucracy continued to run the country while Akhenaten coveted his god. While isolating himself in his new capital, he increasingly left the government and diplomats to their own devices. The civil administration of the government was run by his chief minister Ai, Akhenaten's father-in-law. The military was controlled by General Horemheb, who had married Nefertiti's sister. Both men were to become pharaoh before the 18th dynasty ended. This pair of closely related officials no doubt kept everything under control in a discreet manner, while Akhetaten pursued his own philosophical and religious interests. This wasn't perfect, however. Egypt was still being ignored. Without a strong leadership in the political field, Egypt began to lose foreign connections and began to become isolated from the rest of the world. The military, although still strong, was also being neglected.